Continuing on with our discussion about teen dating violence, we're going to look a little bit at why someone might stay in an unhealthy or an abusive relationship. So, often a question that comes to people's minds when we're talking about dating abuse or domestic violence is they should just break up, right? Why don't they just leave? If the relationship is so bad, they should just break up and everything will be fixed. But why might that be very, very difficult for someone who's in an unhealthy or an abusive relationship to leave or end that relationship? Take a few minutes, maybe write down some reasons that you can think of for why that might be very difficult for someone. Common reasons that it might be tough for someone to leave or end a harmful relationship are maybe they have conflicting emotions. Maybe they have been with that person for a while, or they still have a lot of feelings for that person, and they feel like maybe they don't necessarily want to end the relationship because they do still have feelings of affection or love for that person. Maybe they feel as though they won't be safe to leave that relationship. Maybe they're afraid of what that person will do to them or what that person will do to themselves. Maybe they believe that those harmful and abusive behaviors are normal or that they deserve them. Maybe they feel like there's something that they should be doing better to kind of fix that relationship. Or maybe they feel like they won't be able to find anything better. Maybe they've put a lot of energy and effort and time into that relationship, and it feels almost wasteful to throw all of that away because they have put so much energy into that relationship. They might have lowered self-esteem where they feel like maybe in some ways they deserve those harmful behaviors. Maybe they feel a lot of pressure from their friends or their parents to kind of stay in that relationship. Maybe other people in their lives really like the person who's harming them. Or maybe they just don't have very many other people in their lives, especially if the harmful behaviors have involved kind of trying to pull them away from other people in their lives. They might feel like they don't really have anyone else to rely on. They might have maybe children or pets involved in their relationship. That might make things a lot more complicated. Or maybe they live together or rely on their partner for financial support or other resources. So there can be a lot of factors that can make ending a relationship, especially ending an abusive or a harmful relationship, very, very, very difficult. Another common reason that we see is called the cycle of abuse. We have that illustrated here. The cycle of abuse is a pattern that we often see harmful or abusive relationships following. So, we have 3 phases: honeymoon, tension building, and explosion. So let's go ahead and take a look at these different phases of this cycle. The first phase is called the honeymoon phase. Almost all relationships start out in what we call a honeymoon phase. And that's a pretty common term that we often hear used. So what do you think a honeymoon phase might look like? What types of things might 2 people in a new relationship say or do when they first begin dating? Typically in a honeymoon phase, everyone is on their best behavior. Things seem really happy and fun and exciting, and the couple just wants to spend every moment together. Many relationships start out this way, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. But just because we have an exciting new relationship, that doesn't mean that our life stops happening or our life stops being stressful. We've got lots of things in our lives that stress us out. What are some of those things? Maybe we have school or work or other things going in our lives that are causing us stress. So if there's tension in a relationship or stress in a relationship, that can kind of build up over time and maybe kind of feel like almost walking on eggshells. Tension and stress can build in a healthy relationship or an unhealthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, we would typically see some type of conflict resolution or conversation or compromise happening. And we have those 8 protective factors that we talked about in our section on healthy relationships. So in a healthy relationship, even as that stress and tension is building and things are getting more difficult, we still have respect for each other, we still support each other, we're still safe with each other, we still are making decisions together, we're still communicating with each other, and we have those 8 protective factors keeping us in a pretty healthy balance, even if things do kind of go up and down a little bit, or maybe there are some tense moments. We still have those protective factors keeping both people more safe. In an unhealthy relationship, stress and tension or arguments can kind of continue to build and build until they escalate into an explosion. The explosion is some type of harmful or abusive behavior that happens. So typically we would see maybe the first time it happens, it might be something that maybe is a little bit less dangerous or less harmful. Maybe they use jealousy, or they call their partner a hurtful name, or something like that. So that harmful behavior might happen, and the partner might kind of react how they react. And how might the person who did the harmful behavior try to get from that explosion back down to that honeymoon phase? Take a few minutes and think about that. Do you have any ideas? Some things they might do might include things like apologizing or giving gifts or promising to change or never let it happen again. They might also come up with an excuse for why that harmful behavior happened. Maybe they say that they just were having a really bad day, or they were having a really tough month, or something like that. They might even try to put the blame for that behavior on the other person. So they might say something like, "Oh, well, you were just talking to that person you know I don't like. That's why I did it, so you need to not do that anymore." Or something like that, but kind of trying to put the blame for their harmful behavior onto their partner. So whatever they do, the other person might forgive them and kind of bring that relationship back to that honeymoon phase. And then the cycle kind of starts over. They get back to the honeymoon phase and things seem great. Yes, like we figured it out, we did it, things are good again. But again, our life keeps happening. Tension and stress continue to build in the relationship. And as that continues to build, eventually we get to the explosion phase again. And when we get to the explosion phase, typically that behavior ends up being just a little bit more harmful or a little bit more dangerous than it was the time before. And when we get back down to that honeymoon phase, typically that honeymoon phase lasts just a little bit less time. So it gets just a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter each time. So as the cycle continues, we have behaviors, harmful or abusive behaviors, that are becoming just a little more dangerous and a little more harmful each time. And because that honeymoon phase is getting shorter and shorter, the cycle goes around faster and faster, which means that these harmful behaviors are also happening more and more often. So we have behaviors that are getting more and more dangerous over time and happening with greater and greater frequency, or more and more often. So that's how sometimes these behaviors that start off seemingly not too harmful can escalate, and sometimes even in a very short time become very, very dangerous or very, very hurtful. So that cycle, kind of going around in circles, that back and forth of going from honeymoon phase to tension to explosion, can make it very difficult for someone to break out of that cycle and end that relationship. This can have some very significant effects on the person experiencing the abuse. So we're going to look a little bit at some of the effects that dating abuse can have on the person experiencing abuse. Some of these effects can be very serious. At the top of the list, we have death by suicide or homicide, which would be murder by the abusive partner. We can also see things like maybe physical abuse from, if it's severe enough, can result in disabling injuries. Often the impacts of especially emotional abuse, but all types of abuse, can be things like depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder. Often the person who's experiencing the abuse might also be dealing with things like academic difficulties. Maybe they've experienced class absence, so they've missed class time because of the abuse or because of the mental toll that that abuse is taking on them. And maybe they can get poorer grades because of that. They might experience a lot of feeling like their identity is lost or their self-esteem is lowered. They kind of feel like maybe they're not worth a whole lot, or maybe they're feeling really hopeless or ashamed. They feel like maybe the abusive behaviors are their own fault. Sometimes their coping skills will break down. So think about that for a minute. What are some coping skills? What are some examples of healthy coping skills or things that you use to cope with stress in your own life? Maybe things like physical exercise or art or writing or talking it over with friends. Different people have different types of behaviors that they use as a healthy coping skill. Often in a harmful or abusive relationship, that can take such a significant mental toll and be such a constant stress in someone's life that their normal healthy coping skills no longer work, because over time they experience so much stress that those aren't enough to deal with that amount of stress that the constant harmful behaviors or abuse can have on them. So as those healthy coping skills break down, they might be more at risk of maybe alcohol or substance dependency, or maybe different risky behaviors. So dating abuse can have some very, very serious and very significant effects on the person experiencing abuse. And so we do need to take it very seriously. It's not something that's just trivial or lighthearted. It is something that can have some very significant effects on the person experiencing abuse. Often these effects don't just go away when the relationship ends. Often these effects can take a lot of time to heal from, and in some cases, maybe they are never really fully healed from some of these effects. So that's kind of why we really want to take dating abuse and dating violence very, very seriously. So we're going to go ahead and stop here. Just a reminder, make sure you're taking care of yourself, because I do realize that these videos do deal with a lot of very heavy content. So just a reminder, make sure you're taking care of yourselves, and if you do need to reach out to us, feel free. We're more than happy to talk to somebody about some of these things or answer any additional questions someone might have. So we are going to stop here, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about consent and sexual assault.